His gun was pointed at the wrong woman. Now his badge hangs by a thread. Agent Sarah Marshall stands in front of her car, hazard lights blinking on the quiet suburban street. She's 7 months pregnant, wearing a loose-fitting blouse and slacks, holding her phone while waiting for roadside assistance. Her FBI badge and ID are in her purse on the passenger seat. Officer James Cooper pulls up behind her vehicle, lights flashing. He approaches with his hand resting near his holster, despite the routine nature of the stop. Sarah notices his tense body language and carefully turns to face him. Is there a problem here? Cooper's tone is immediately confrontational. Just having some car trouble, officer. I've already called for assistance. Sarah responds professionally, maintaining her composure. Cooper's eyes narrow as he looks at her vehicle, then back at her. License and registration. Now. Of course. My documents are in my purse. I'll get them. Stop right there. Cooper's voice rises sharply. Keep your hands where I can see them. Sarah remains calm but firm. Officer, I'm simply reaching for my identification. On the ground. Now. Sir, I'm 7 months pregnant. I cannot safely get on the ground. I'm going to slowly reach for my credentials. Cooper draws his weapon. I said on the ground. Do not make me repeat myself. Several passing cars slow down. Phones come out, recording the scene. Sarah knows the situation is spiraling, but maintains her professional demeanor. Officer Cooper, she says, reading his nameplate. I am a federal agent. If you'll allow me to show you my credentials. Federal agent? Right, and I'm the president. Get down now. Just then, 2 unmarked vehicles screech to a halt. Special agents Martinez and Wilson emerge, weapons drawn. Federal agents, lower your weapon. Cooper spins around, startled. What the? That's Supervisory Special Agent Marshall from the Civil Rights Division, Martinez announces. Lower your weapon immediately. The color drains from Cooper's face as he slowly holsters his gun. Sarah finally reaches into her car and retrieves her credentials. Officer Cooper, I suggest you contact your supervisor, she says calmly. We need to have a serious discussion about proper procedure and constitutional rights. 1 month later, in a police department conference room, Sarah, now 8 months pregnant, stands before a group of officers, including a chastened Cooper. What happened that day could have ended tragically, she begins. Instead, we're using it as a teaching moment. Today's training isn't about shame or blame. It's about recognition of our implicit biases and how they affect our split-second decisions in the field. Cooper raises his hand. Agent Marshall, I want to apologize. I've spent the last month examining my assumptions and actions. I was wrong. Acknowledgement is the first step, Officer Cooper. Now, let's talk about how we ensure every citizen is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance. Because the next person you stop might not be a federal agent, but they deserve the same constitutional protections. The police department conference room slowly emptied as officers filed out, their expressions thoughtful and subdued. The day's training session had left its mark, stirring uncomfortable but necessary conversations about bias and accountability. Chairs scraped against the floor, notebooks closed, and quiet discussions floated through the air as the group dispersed. Agent Marshall gathered her materials, her movements measured and deliberate, as she accommodated her 8-month pregnancy. Officer Cooper lingered behind, watching his colleagues leave while gathering the courage to approach. His uniform, usually worn with unquestioning pride, felt heavier today. The past month had changed him in ways he was still processing. Finally, as the last officer left the room, he made his way to where Agent Marshall stood organizing her presentation materials. "Agent Marshall," he began, his voice carrying a humility that wasn't there a month ago. "What you're doing here, using what happened to create positive change instead of just punishing me, I won't forget that. Most people would have pushed for my badge, but you saw an opportunity for something more important." His eyes met hers, showing a sincerity that came from genuine self-reflection. Sarah paused in her organizing, giving Cooper her full attention. The afternoon sun, streaming through the conference room windows, cast a warm glow across her face as she considered his words. "We're all works in progress, Officer Cooper," she replied, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her pregnant belly. "The goal isn't perfection. It never has been. What matters is continuous improvement and accountability. The question is, are you ready to be part of that change? Not just for yourself, but for your fellow officers and the community you serve." Subscribe to the channel and follow along to see how this powerful story unfolds. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Cooper straightened his shoulders, a gesture that spoke of renewed purpose rather than defensive pride. The change in his posture was subtle but significant. This wasn't the same officer who had drawn his weapon on a pregnant woman a month ago. "Yes, ma'am, I am," he responded, his words carrying the weight of a personal pledge. Sarah nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she gathered the last of her materials. "Then something good came from that day after all," she said, heading toward the door. She paused in the doorway, turning back to face him. "I'll see you at next month's community outreach program. We're starting a new chapter in police-community relations, and your story, your journey, could help others understand why change is so crucial." With those words, she left Cooper standing in the conference room, his reflection visible in the window as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor, symbolizing the long road of change ahead.